Good evening. It's 5:30, everyone, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Christina Turner, and I'm the city manager for Morgan Hill. And I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. And we wish it were not under these very frustrating circumstances. I want to start by first acknowledging the significant impacts that the power outages have had on many in our community. Concerns from our community and the city include, but of course are not limited to, the health and safety of our senior community and for those reliant on power for medical needs, the internet outage affecting students' ability to complete homework and parents telecommuting, loss of food resulting in financial loss. And we know there were many more impacts felt by our community. To have this happen not once, but for many, multiple days is unacceptable. That was compounded by the fact that there was minimal communication coming from PG&E to the community as well as to the city. I want to make sure I point out the city does not control the PG&E electric and gas service that is provided in our community. Instead, the California Public Utilities Commission is responsible for the oversight of utility companies, including PG&E. For several weeks, we've been communicating these concerns to PG&E leadership with minimal actionable results from PG&E. We're calling for action from PG&E to provide the city and the community with specific details as to the causes of the outages, what they have done and are continuing to do to ensure they do not happen again, and how they will communicate better moving forward. As such, we've coordinated this town hall this evening with PG&E to address these issues and how we can move forward. In addition, PG&E is going to be attending a future city council meeting to provide more information as it becomes available to our community. At this future council meeting, the city council will have an opportunity to engage with the community and PG&E. And with that, I'll turn it over to Teresa Alvarado with PG&E.
Thank you, Christina. And thank you all for inviting us to be with you here this evening. So I want to start off by saying that I apologize for how deeply impactful recent outages have been for the residents of Morgan Hill. They have been very disruptive, as Christina mentioned, and we have not provided you with an adequate response as to their cause. And that's why we're here tonight. Tonight, we're going to talk to you about recent events and the work that we are doing to make improvements. We have taken action, and we're looking forward to sharing that with you. I'm Teresa Alvarado, as Christina mentioned, and I'm the Vice President for the South Bay and Central Coast region. So my work is to work with my colleagues internally to drive safety and performance improvements for our customers locally. In June of last year, in 2021, PG&E reorganized into 5 regions with a regional vice president leading internal cross-functional collaboration and community engagement in each region where each of the regional vice presidents live. So I've been in my role for 15 months, but I'm a boomerang to PG&E. I actually worked at the company from 1999 to 2006. And I came back after 15 years because I can honestly say that I am proud to work for PG&E. Not because we get everything right, we don't. But I do know that each of my colleagues and our leadership is committed to doing better for our customers. And I want all of you to know that your city manager, Christina Turner, and the whole team at the city have been working with us over the past few weeks, asking us the tough questions that you've posed and ensuring this opportunity to hear from you directly. So as I said, tonight we're going to share how we responded to the record heat wave that we all experienced earlier this month and what steps we're taking to mitigate future power outages in Morgan Hill, the city where I actually have my office. Next slide. So I'd like to introduce you to the PG&E team presenting this evening. Joining me are Kelly Ball, Senior Director for Electric Field Operations for the South Bay and Central Coast, and also a longtime Morgan Hill resident, James Tusillo, Distribution Engineer Manager, and Tom Smith, Program Manager for Customer Outreach. But before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to remind everyone to always be prepared in case of an emergency. Create a disaster supply kit. Be sure to include anything that you may need during an emergency, like food, water, medication, flashlights, first aid kits, pet food, and a list of emergency contacts that you may need to keep yourself your family, or your business safe. And to help you prepare an emergency supply kit or to find tips on how to be prepared, you can visit safetyactioncenter.pge.com. And finally, a few housekeeping notes about the webinar tonight and how to use the web features. So I want to make sure that you know that this presentation is being recorded and live streamed on the city's Facebook page. So not only can it be watched tonight, but we will also post it on our website and share the link with the city so that they can distribute it as well. If you'd like to ask a question, please submit it at any time in the Q&A. You can do this by clicking on the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen and typing in your question. We will not be using the raise hand feature. We will give a brief presentation. It will last about 30 minutes, and then we'll take time to go through your questions. And Michelle Bigelow, your city clerk and public information officer, is kind enough to be monitoring the questions and leading the Q&A portion of the presentation. So she will be asking your questions. The webcast is scheduled until 7 p.m. and we'll do our best to answer all of your questions before then. But if we're not able to get to one of your questions today, or if you have a very specific question, or if you're dialing in and don't have access to a computer, you are welcome to use our dedicated email address and reach out to us directly. It's wildfiresafety@pge.com. Again, wildfiresafety@pge.com, and we will respond to you promptly. Next slide. So I've already shared this, but I want to say again, with confidence, that me and my colleagues are each committed to providing you with excellent, reliable service, and we're working diligently to improve your service by taking immediate steps to reduce future disruptions. And I know that in addition to the repeated outages that you've experienced, our communication has been lacking. On those days of the heat wave, when we were asking many of you to conserve and then thanking our customers for their conservation efforts, which averted rotating outages, many of you were actually experiencing outages for other reasons. So I'd like to start there with the conditions that we are all experiencing in California and the Greater West, and how PG&E is continually adapting to the ongoing drought conditions and climate changes to help keep you safe and our system operating. So, as you can no doubt understand, the conditions that lead to catastrophic wildfires continue to worsen with drought conditions persisting in California over the last several years. To put it in perspective, from years 2000 to 2021, we experienced the driest 22-year period in our state in over 1,200 years. The years 2020 and 2021 were the fifth and second driest years in the last century. In addition, we saw an increase in the number of acres burned during non-red flag warning days. This means that wildfires are starting without the severe wind that we would normally be accustomed to seeing. The minimal recent rain that we saw has not done much to reduce our wildfire threat conditions. So our wildfire mitigation efforts have continued to evolve to meet this ongoing and growing challenge. To talk more about the different kinds of outages that our customers may experience, I'm now going to hand things over to Tom Smith. And I'm sorry, I didn't introduce our speakers. I did introduce you earlier. Sorry about that, Tom.
No problem, Teresa. Give me a second to find the dang mute button, so I appreciate it. All right, hello everyone. My name is Tom Smith. I'm a program manager in customer outreach. I really want to thank everybody for taking time, out of your busy days to, spend a little time understanding what is going on out there. So, but before we talk to you more specifically about the outages that you've experienced recently, I want to take a moment and talk about the various types of outages that may occur and the process for notifying you of those outages. I hope that this will give you some context about the recent experiences and those outages that you experienced. So those outages this month, they were not planned rotating outages. I want to thank everyone, as Teresa mentioned earlier this month. You limited your power use when we were asked to conserve energy, and those changes that you made helped make it so we didn't have to conduct rotating outages in your community. So I understand that the window of time that the outages were in sort of and sometimes matched the outages that we were announcing potentially for rotating outages, but I can assure you that no rotating outages actually occurred. And we'll talk a little bit more about those, the true causes of those outages in just a minute. So the outages that occurred, they were due to system damage and outages on EPS enabled lines. That's why you didn't receive any advance notification in any of those instances. So as we show on this slide, our ability to notify you in advance of a power outage depends on the type of outage. So broadly speaking, there's two different types of outages as shown on this slide. Those that we can provide advance notification for, like a PSPS event or a rotating outage, and those that we're unable to provide advance notification for. So for public safety power shutoffs, rotating outages, any planned maintenance that we may do, equipment upgrades, you're going to expect to be notified and receive regular updates by a phone call, text, email, social media post, and maybe even a news release depending on the work. And then for more information on the rotating outages, you can visit California ISO, so caiso.com. Now, for emergency repairs, active wildfires, system damages, and any outages on EPSS-enabled lines, so similar to what we saw during the heat storm, you're going to expect an update during and after the outage by phone call, text, and email. And so we are unable to give you advance notice because obviously we don't know when something's going to malfunction or the tree may hit the line, etc. So for those of you who may not know about enhanced power line safety settings yet, this safety technology automatically turns off the power within 1/10 of a second if an object such as a tree comes in contact with a power line. Given the substantial ignition reduction benefits that we've experienced in the last 2 years, this year we've expanded these settings to all of our circuits in high fire risk areas and in some adjacent areas. And you can learn more about that program at pge.com/EPSS. Now I'm going to turn it over to Kelly Ball, who's going to walk us through an overview of the recent outages and the steps we've taken to mitigate the future outages. Kelly?
Yeah, Tom, thank you. Appreciate that. And good evening, everyone. My name is Kelly Ball. I'm the Senior Director for Electric Distribution Operations in the Central Coast and South Bay region, which is inclusive of Morgan Hill, of which I've been a resident for almost 11 years now. So very nice place to live, and hopefully I can provide some information as to what was happening here, and that's my goal. So as you can see on the slide right in front of you, 62% of the outages in the recent heat storm were due to equipment failures and or equipment activations. And I'll explain the difference between those two in just a minute. And as I can see in the chat, there is an additional September 25th outage, which I'll touch on at the end of the slide here. So one of the questions we typically get is when you see these times and dates at these locations and the customer number affected, people may have come on at different times. And so you may have experienced an outage that was longer than your neighbors and those around you. And really the reasoning for that is the way that we conduct our power restoration efforts is to ensure we get as many people on as quickly as possible, referred to as step restoration. So when we find the source of the issue, we go back to the nearest source of electricity and we start restoring out from there. So the outage may last longer for some that are a further distance from that source location and be restored more quickly for those that are closer. So just wanted to level set that with everybody. And what I'd like to do now is go through these one by one in a relatively expeditious manner and have a quick conversation about the what, when, and why, and what we did to remediate that situation. The next slide too, without getting there too quickly, is what we're doing going forward. So just to answer that hopefully up front. So the heat storm lasted from basically September 5th through September 8th. Those were the major hot days that we experienced, unprecedented heat in the Morgan Hill area and the surrounding areas. And so on the 5th, you can see 3 major outages occurred and the customers affected. And those are our circuit numbers coming out of the Morgan Hill substation serving Morgan Hill and surrounding area. The first one was a protective device operated with no cause found. And many times, and you'll see that a couple times down here, that can be a tree branch that fell off and hit the line and fell to the ground. Could have been a bird strike, in which case we would not know when or where that happened. Could be other sorts of animals, mylar balloons, things of that nature. But we try and be very prescriptive about what happens so we can improve it going forward in the future. The second one was a protection trip due to heat event loading, and I'm going to explain this a little bit. So we adjusted some settings on several pieces of equipment in the Morgan Hill area, and this equipment was set as such to prevent wildfires. It was done that way purposely and specifically to make sure that it reacted extremely quickly to any anomalies seen on the line, so that we wouldn't have an issue with wildfire given our current state that Teresa articulated earlier with the drought and the dry conditions in the area. So we did adjust those settings and look at opportunities to shrink that area, and those are completed, and I'll articulate that again on the next slide. We did have failed underground equipment, and you'll see that on the 5th and the 6th here. Those were immediate repairs, and so as soon as we see that happen, we'll send crews out to take care of that situation, be it the transformer that you see or the equipment that you see on 10 o'clock p.m. on the 5th. And so what we do is we'll either replace and or repair that transformer and or repair and replace that equipment, be it cable or other pieces of equipment that are underground. So these are immediate response items. And some of this is really, not some of this, this is really due to the heat, the loading that is it's just unprecedented that we haven't seen in this area. So let's keep going because there is a lot more to discuss here, and I want to talk about several things. And so without completely draining through this slide, I do want to touch on a couple items here. The way we've segmented this is throughout the week that we had these heat issues, and there are a couple of instances, and I want to focus on one that was significantly impactful on the 7th at 4:43 p.m. You'll see 8,100 customers and failed underground equipment. So this was actually trying to be fully transparent to keep our customers energized. We had a failed piece of underground equipment. It was an elbow that carries capable of carrying 600 amps at significant voltage. So it's a lot of power going through this system. This elbow failed, and so we did some immediate switching remotely and on site to transfer that load of all these customers over to another circuit, switch it, and get everybody back on. The temperature didn't let up, it didn't cool down, and our system acted as it should have and opened the circuit, discontinuing power so that there wasn't an imminent catastrophic failure of equipment. So it acted as it was designed. And we're putting power back to as many people as we could quickly. That's why you see the large number of customers here. Subsequently, we had to come out and replace all of that equipment very quickly and get everybody back in power. There were several other items that happened. There was overhead conductor that was arcing, and this is typically due to heat-related stress. So significant load, cooling down, less load, significant load, and unprecedented levels. Not for what this equipment was designed to do, and I'm going to touch on that in just a second on what we're doing to remedy that. Last piece I wanted to touch on, because I did see some questions in the chat, and I did want to touch on this. So September 25th, which I believe was this Sunday, there was an overhead connection failure. And after looking at that, I did see some questions here. Really what that looks to be is some significant stress due to the heat incident that happened a couple of weeks ago, and that piece of equipment failing as a result of that significant increased load. So we do inspections. We do infrared inspections to ensure that heat and the temperature of our equipment is within our specs. And this piece of equipment was adequately inspected, and within, it was about 2 weeks, we had a failure of that piece of equipment. So we will continue to inspect those pieces of equipment all of our circuits and systems with our infrared equipment, our overhead drone inspections, and our walking inspections as well to ensure that those are working as they should be. So to touch on some of this equipment that failed due to the excessive heat, if anyone was here in 2006, I was part of the emergency response at that time as well. That was the most recent significant heat wave, except for this one we just experienced. And what we've done is reviewed our sizing and classing of equipment in the San Jose area. So San Jose and surrounding areas and Morgan Hill, Gilroy, and that sort of corridor there was typically a coastal region. That's what it was considered. The climate change we've experienced, the increased heat and temperature, and the subsequent days of that increased heat, we have moved that to an interior rating, which changes how we size our equipment and what equipment we put in. And the other piece is there's 6 climate zones used to estimate customer demand. So we look at things like the climate zone for, air conditioning, industrial usage and things of that nature. And we've increased that to address the increased temperatures we've seen in this area. So what does that mean? What it means is since 2006, we've been addressing this climate change and will continue to do so. And this was another opportunity for us to see how our equipment reacts and tolerates that heat and improve what we're doing even more so than we have in the past. So, I think what Teresa mentioned before, we're learning as we go and we're acting as quickly as we possibly can. And we will continue to act more quickly to ensure that we are sizing our equipment and putting the equipment in based on these new climate zones and regions. If we could jump to the next slide, please. Thank you. So that's what happened. Now what have we done? What are we doing? We've repaired damaged equipment. That's an emergency basis. We do that immediately. That is done and it will continue to be done. Adjusting the sensitivity settings. So we have embarked in, I think as a state, on a new reality, which is the wildfire issues and climate change that we're seeing over the last couple of years. And we are adjusting our system to react appropriately. So we adjusted the sensitivity of a couple pieces of our equipment to ensure that it'll continue to serve our customers with also safety and wildfire in mind. So that has been completed. Fault indicators. What fault indicators are, basically they're small pieces of equipment about the size of a medium can that are hung on our overhead and underground facilities that allow us to find faults and issues as quickly as possible. It's a visual indicator, has a light on it, and we can tell between which 2 fault indicators the issue might be. We're continuing to install more of those as we see opportunities going forward. And then the continued vegetation management on trees near power lines, our inspections in our higher tiered areas that are more prone to wildfire. In Morgan Hill, that would pretty much be the foothills to the west and the east side of Highway 101. So those are the things that we're doing to improve. I think there's a little bit more information from my partner here, James, and I'll turn it over to him to continue speaking to those things. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. All right. Again, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name again is James Tusillo. I'm an electrical engineer for PG&E, tasked with both helping serve these communities, specifically Morgan Hill, from a capacity system standpoint, as well as our reliability efforts to ensure that your lights are on at all times, as well as that the system is protected in a safe manner to ensure that no catastrophic wildfires will begin. So with that, I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about some of the specific design of the system in this area and how we serve the community of Morgan Hill from our Morgan Hill substation. All right. So on my screen is a Google Earth view of 2 circuits specifically in the Morgan Hill community. I have not shown all the circuits because I wanted to point out some detail here, but you can imagine we have several of these different colored type of electrical circuits that go throughout the valley and serve the immediate area of Morgan Hill. At the center of this is our Morgan Hill substation. This is on the west side of the 101. This is where our transmission incoming lines come and step down the voltage to distribution voltage levels, which then traverse the city streets and roads to supply power to your homes and community and commercial facilities. As you can see here in this representation here, we have circuits that both feed the downtown Morgan Hill area on both the east and west side, as well as up into the foothill and up into further west into the mountains. One thing I wanted to take a quick note is regarding the high fire risk areas or high fire threat districts. These polygons indicated on the screen here show how even though the downtown community close to the 101 is within what we call the non-tiered high fire risk area, very close in proximity to these communities is also some of the most hazardous environment where we run power distribution through. And so as a result of that, we have to make sure that our settings and our protective equipment on these lines that not only feed the in-town portions of this distribution grid, but also feed into these more rural areas are adequately and safely protected. There was some questions in the chat regarding one event, which was great because I had planned to highlight that tonight. And that was the incident, as Kelly referred to, on 9/25 on Sunday evening, where we had equipment failure at what we call a riser, which is a transition between an overhead and an underground portion of the system. How we protect the distribution system is not much unlike how your circuit breaker panel operates within your home or residence. We have essentially a main breaker at the substation, and then we have other protective devices downstream, such as reclosers and circuit breakers and fuses. These devices help segment the grid so that when we do have a failure or when we do have an outage, it could be a car pole incident where a vehicle makes contact with a pole and brings the lines together to a faulted condition. A faulted condition is basically anything that's abnormal on the system. And these devices operate to interrupt that source of energy so that the situation is made safe and it's de-energized. We place these devices strategically in the system to ensure that the greatest amount of reliability is maintained. So with these devices, again, similar to your home, the device at the furthest downstream location closest to the problem is the device that's expected to operate and interrupt the flow of power to that faulted condition. Unfortunately, that results in an outage to everyone beyond that device. It's very similar to a main breaker or a circuit breaker feeding one room of your house having a problem, and it's only that one room of your house that's affected rather than the whole house. So we set up these devices and we coordinate them in that fashion to provide safety when faults do occur on the system. This circuit specifically, the Morgan Hill 2109, which has been one of the most heavily impacted circuits in the last few weeks, has had several outages associated with it. Again, the most recent one Sunday night at this location on the east side of the 101. You can see here this line that I've drawn is actually the path back to the substation, the Morgan Hill substation. So when the problem occurred here on Sunday night, we had this line recloser operate to de-energize everyone basically from this point to the east of the 101. And that impacted what's shown here and highlighted in purple. These devices are there and are set to, again, protect for these fault conditions and help make sure that ignitions and other hazards associated with energized utility equipment are removed as quickly as possible from the system. And you can see here again, this other circuit I've illustrated here, the blue circuit, how it feeds up into this west side of the community. And those circuits also have similar settings there in place to protect. So I just wanted to take a little bit of time here tonight to just kind of give the lay of the land here from an electric distribution perspective. And then we're going to talk about some of the improvements that we're making to help reduce these outages, the size of them, as well as items that we're addressing to improve the capacity of the grid in this community so that when heat waves come in the future, the equipment is better suited to handle those conditions. All right, we're going to go back to the next slide here. Okay, so one of the main projects that I'm excited to share tonight that we're going to be undertaking in 2023 is the installation of a new distribution circuit out of the Morgan Hill substation to be able to expand the capacity in this area, as well as to further create additional circuitry that will allow better reliability should an outage occur. Basically, if an outage does occur in the future, it will impact far fewer customers as a result. This new circuit will come out of the Morgan Hill substation with about 1,000 feet of underground new cable and a reconductoring of 1,000 feet of overhead conductors. Again, this large project will substantially increase the reliability as well as allow for new loads to come on the system and support existing customer loads. In addition to this large capacity project, our team is working relentlessly on reacting and monitoring the outages that have occurred and working on reconfiguring and optimizing these protective settings on our network such that the events are, again, constrained to the least amount of customers impacted as possible. There are things we can do, and we have already begun to do, to immediately address some of these settings to, one, ensure that we can ride through future heat wave events without having these overcurrent events happen, which are operating these protected devices, and two, that we're ensuring that the equipment is being managed in a way that it's within its ratings, as well as using infrared inspections to help identify weak points before they fail. So not only reacting, but to try to be proactive to identify components and equipment that may be reaching the end of their life and taking action to replace them through proactive measures. So those are a few of the things that we're doing. And as Kelly mentioned as well, we are looking at overall our load forecasting for this area as well as the greater Silicon Valley to ensure that as new customers bring on air conditioning in their homes that may have never had air conditioning, as new electric vehicles are added to homes and communities and fast charging systems, that we're looking at that trajectory of where that load's going, and we're starting to build an investment plan and a capital plan that allows us to ensure that the facilities are sized and are managed adequately to handle the increasing load. It's as I like to say, it's something that we that there's some activities that have happened that given a few years ago, even before the pandemic, we would have not have expected with respect to increases in home energy usage, seeing increases in policy changes with respect to electric vehicles. And so we're really looking at a 10-year plan to improve the capacity of the system to not only help serve the load within the equipment that's existing, but to be able to also serve that more reliably. So I appreciate the great questions tonight. Looking forward to answering some of the ones along with my colleagues, and I'll turn it now back. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, James. Thank you very much, Kelly, as well. And I hope our Morgan Hill residents understand that we really do recognize that power outages are very disruptive to your lives. As you've heard tonight, we're doing a lot of work to mitigate outages, while also doing everything that we can to keep you and the Morgan Hill community safe from potential wildfire ignitions. But if outages do occur, we have a variety of tools available for our customers to help you prepare and stay up to date during power outages. To learn more and watch a video explaining how those enhanced power line safety settings work, you can visit pge.com/EPSS. You see that on the upper left there. You may also want to visit pge.com/outages for up-to-date information on power outages. Again, I know that there was not good information when we had the heat wave that hit. We had a lot of issues happening simultaneously, and we did not have real-time information for you that would enable you to make good decisions. We are going to do better at that. Upper right, you can confirm your, bottom left. You can confirm your contact information at pge.com/myalerts so that our team can share information with you as it is available via text and by email. And then lastly, more information on different backup power options can be found at pge.com/backuppower. So I really want to thank everyone for taking the time to participate. We hope that we've answered some of your questions in the presentation, but we are more than happy to answer any of your questions that you have posted as well. And we want to make sure that you have the email address one more time. If you have feedback, if you have a specific question that relates to your home, or anything else that you want to send to us directly, we have a dedicated line. It's 866, phone number is 866-743-6589. That's 866-743-6589. Or you can email us at wildfiresafety@pge.com. So I'm going to turn things back over to Michelle and the city team so that we can begin answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. For our PG&E folks, and to the benefit of some of the folks in the community that joined a little later, can you speak again to the cause of the outages that took place on Sunday and yesterday? And it looks like in the Q&A there were perhaps a couple today.
Are you saying that there were outages today?
In the Q&A, there's mention of outages on Sunday and then yesterday as well as today.
So Kelly, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So I can speak to the Sunday one, and I think James also alluded to it as well, but that was a failure of a connection at the interchange between overhead and underground facilities. And so when we see vast changes in the draw or the need for power at those locations, some of those connections will fail at times when they're overexerted. And so that connection failed at the top of a pole, and that was the reason for the outage on Sunday. I saw the question in the chat, and I was scrolling through our outage metrics here for an outage yesterday, and I don't see anything that we were made aware of. I'm happy to follow up on that and ensure. I can probably do a little bit better deep dive after the call here, but I don't see anything immediately that happened yesterday. And I'd ask James if he has any other additional information for that question.
Yeah, no, I think we're gonna have to get back and look into that. One thing that I just want to call out too is that the area highlighted here, specifically out of the Morgan Hill substation, there might be some folks joining us from some areas that are kind of on the fringe of that system. So it'd be best if we can make contact and follow up with you directly on those issues.
So for the community, if you would like PG&E to follow up with you directly, you can put your name and email address in the Q&A, and I can make sure that they get that and give those to them to follow up with you. Can you tell us why, and I know you just went through quite a lengthy explanation, but why Morgan Hill was hit so much worse than our neighbors, San Jose and Gilroy, who experienced the same heat, the same days, but they didn't experience the outages we did?
Kelly?
Yeah, sorry, the mute was eluding me here. So I think there's a couple of answers for that, for little technical reasons. And so I believe from the homework we've done, the number of outages in surrounding communities was significantly higher. And so there were significantly more outages outside of Morgan Hill. The outages in Morgan Hill were very impactful due to their size and scope. They were large devices that activated for safety reasons or activated for overloading reasons. And those were, impactful to the community to the thousands. When other areas, they were, 10, 15, 20, very localized outages. And so my opinion, not scientific fact, but we're seeing the shift in the climate here, and what we're doing to try and change with that is, improve and, solidify our equipment to be able to handle these anomalies of load and increased air conditioning load, increased just load more electronic appliances. And so we're doing that now. I have, I'm trying to look at all the outages here, and there was a significant amount throughout the entire South Bay area. And so I do know that it was very impactful to Morgan Hill, which is why we're trying to share as much information as we can, and also share the improvements that we're taking going forward. So I don't know if another team member has any things they'd like to add or any additional details.
Sure, Kelly, I can just chime in a little bit more too. So it's interesting in looking at the topology of our system in this area too, as I highlighted on the Google Earth overview, is that when we have this convergence of both these rural systems that kind of feed up into our high fire risk areas, and we have a core underground system as what was shown, kind of very close to the 101. We have to ensure, like I mentioned, that we're protecting into those high fire risk areas. That's part of our EPSS program, which I think many are aware we began in 2021 in the August-September timeframe, and we implemented in a much larger fashion this year. So having those settings set sensitively to protect into these high fire risk areas, combined with some of the equipment failure, I think really caused a lot of the challenges that we saw that week. And so things that we're doing again to mitigate that are, number one, we're looking at each one of these outages, understanding exactly what happened, and ensuring that the sensitivity settings that are there and that are necessary for fire prevention, wildfire risk prevention, are the right settings, and that they are tuned to handle this amount of load that we saw during this last heat wave. The second thing that we're doing on a more ongoing basis is we're looking at where, as I showed on the screen, where those polygons, where those high fire risk area boundaries are, and we're installing new protective equipment right on those boundaries, so that the infrastructure that's protecting the system closer into town, closer to that substation, is not affected with EPSS, so that if there is an outage in the underground system, it's constrained to a smaller amount of our circuitry. So those are two things that we are doing, and that are somewhat unique, not just to this area, but to certain areas where we have kind of this close proximity of our high fire risk area with a very high density amount of customer population.
Thank you. And I know you guys have spoken to this, but I'm going to ask you to answer this question again, because I'm seeing it come up a number of times. So many of the outages we had during the heat wave were not a part of flex alerts or rolling blackouts. Can you do another high-level explanation of the difference between these outages and that correlation of the timing, because they felt like rolling blackouts when, the power would go out at 4 and come back on at 9 or 10.
I can take a stab at this one. I'm happy to. So there's a couple of things, and I'm going to do my best to describe the timing is very similar, and I think it's by design to some uniquely unconnected notifications. So when you see a flex alert, we see, heat is coming, that flex alert comes out to alert the communities to save power. Rolling blackouts were not part of these issues. Those was not implemented in Morgan Hill for this time period, so that wasn't a piece of it. But then the outages you'll see are very much similar to the flex alert times. And in a way, that's a very good thing. So we see the heat coming, we see the weather coming, we see the flex alert go out, trying to save power, and at the same time that the flex alert says you need to save power during these times, we see huge spikes in the usage, and we have the issues which we articulated to you earlier. They're not connected in a communications way. It's not like we have a direct line with flex alert and saying these are the times that we're going to have issues and things, but through experience and knowledge and performance of our systems, we do see these things pretty well tied together. And I view that as a benefit. So we see an issue coming, flex alert, we're going to have, increased usage on our facilities at this time period. And we did see issues with just giant spikes in our usage due to the heat wave. And so while they're not connected physically, they are telling us the same thing. It's going to get very hot. We're going to have very high usage on our system. And we could have issues and looking to mitigate those as best we can. But I want to eliminate the rolling blackouts or planned outages. Those did not occur. PG&E did not execute those in the Morgan Hill area. So just wanted to make that very clear.
Thank you. Looking at the distribution investment deferral framework data, it shows the transformers that were scheduled for upgrade years ago were submitted to the CPUC, and they agreed to defer replacement to sometime in the future. Are you saying that not upgrading those as planned did not have an impact?
I'll take this one. Yeah, so for those that aren't aware, the distribution investment deferral framework is a mechanism that we leverage as part of the CPUC process to allow for renewable energy sources to offset the need for grid capacity improvements and upgrades. So essentially it's allowing us to bring on renewable energy like solar and wind and energy storage to help contribute to the greater grid, as well as help support localized capacity issues on the system that are identified per our normal utility planning process. Every year we look at our projections for forecasting of the load on our system and ensure that we are within ratings, and if we are not, or if we're forecasted to exceed those ratings, then we begin the process of developing a project. And in parallel to that, we put the capacity need on the distribution investment deferral framework list, which then allows third parties and others to propose DER solutions to help address that same issue. So for this area, we've had a few items. As I mentioned, this new circuit has been part of the plan for a number of years now, and we're, as mentioned, excited to see it come online in 2023. I'm not aware of the other items that we've had as part of the distribution investment deferral framework list, but if you want to put that question in the chat with your contact info, we can follow up and hopefully answer that more specifically.
Thank you. We have lived in our home in Morgan Hill since 1986 and have had power outages ever since. In the 90s, we had a 3-day outage that PG&E attributed to transformers that couldn't handle warm nights. We were told those transformers were replaced. Now we are being told transformers are the problem again. Were they replaced or not? We've used our 40-year-old Honda generator for years. Is that just the way of the foreseeable future?
So maybe I can answer this in part with James with regards to the transformer. So I think power outage and equipment failure a lot of times gets attributed immediately to the equipment that you can see in its transformer, right? It's that big gray thing on the pole, or it's that thing underground. There's a lot of other equipment we have. There are switches underground, there's cable, there's elbows that transfer power from one place to another. There are overhead switches, fuses. I mean, we can go on. There's a lot of things that can have potential issues with regards to overloading and heat-related issues. One thing we have instituted across the system in many locations is it's called a TAD, a TAD, a temperature alarm device. And it allows us to see the temperature of specifically subsurface transformers, which tend to not cool down as well as the overhead transformers overnight during less loading periods, just because of the heat soaking of the vault and the area around it and the subsurface temperatures. So we do have these alarms. We have been and will continue to proactively change these out when they start to alarm at certain levels, depending on the type and type of transformer that is alarming. We have levels for those, and we are actively changing those out, and will continue to do so. So that's something that we've been proactive in going forward. We'll continue to do, and has been very very helpful for us to make sure that we can find these pieces of equipment before they fail, proactively change them out, and eliminate an unanticipated outage. And so, James, I don't know if I missed anything there, but happy to have you jump in.
No, I think you covered it well. Thanks.
Thank you. Kind of switching gears, there's a lot of questions about reimbursement. So folks, obviously were greatly impacted, not only with the loss of perishable goods, but their time and other inconveniences. And the reimbursement process, specifically for food, it requires, it seems like, some detailed receipts. It seems like a lot of people don't keep their grocery receipts. It's a very complicated process. So is there an easier way to get reimbursed? Will PG&E be compensating customers on their next utility bill? Is there an opportunity in some way for these folks' inconvenience to be addressed?
Tom, I believe
So
you
yeah,
can take that.
go ahead. Yeah, hi, this is Tom. So for claims, we encourage everyone who has experienced some sort of loss via power outage, if you feel it's applicable, to file a claim at pge.com/claims. Or you can also, if you're not comfortable submitting it online, you can also call our contact center at 1-800-PGE-5000. That's 800-743-5000. And one of our representatives will walk the customer through the process as well, and basically put it all together for them on the phone. Generally, PG&E is responsible for damages that result from our negligence. So we're going to review each claim on a case-by-case basis, and then basically pay off those claims when that's found to be the case. What I will say is, for refrigerators or refrigerators with food in them, if they remain closed, typically can hold food for up to anywhere from 4 to 8 hours. We definitely encourage customers to make sure that they keep their refrigerator closed during an outage. Understand they can extend long times. So, but we definitely encourage our customers to try and do everything they can to conserve that cold that they do have in there. But we understand that customers do experience a lot of financial hardship for this. We also do, in extended outage circumstances, have a program where you can submit for compensation through our safety net program as well. And that is all on pg.com/claims.
Thank you. So many folks received no notification or updates throughout the power outages. and the few that did would get a link to a website to track the status, and there were no status updates provided. What is PG&E going to do moving forward to ensure that people are notified and in the loop so that they can make decisions about whether they should go back home or not, or how they should proceed?
So I saw it in the chat, a lot of customers saying that they didn't receive notifications. And so if you are one of those that did not feel like you did not receive a notification, please, and Jennifer, I see you out there mentioning it in the chat. Please put your information. I would like to look it up and see exactly what happened. Typically, the notifications that go out, text, email, phone, they lag by about 10 or 15 minutes while the system sort of works through and gets it out to the carrier to be deployed. We have seen instances where sometimes the carrier sites are affected by the outage as well, and so the message can be delayed. That's rare. So really would be interested in exactly what happened, because typically within about 10 or 15 minutes, you should have those messages in hand. I will say that typically in an outage, once we know that it's extensive, there's something called, in most cases, an auto ETOR, which is an estimated time of restoration. And that's from the experience that on this circuit, most of the time an outage will last this long when it does occur. And that's the time typically that you'll get in that first notification that says when your power is going to come back on. Once they get out there, assess what's going on, understand the work that needs to be done to get the power safely back on, there's usually an update that's sent out. And then you'll get an update saying, okay, originally you were scheduled for this time back on. Now we estimate it could be sooner, it could be later. It just really depends on what's going on. In a storm situation, in a heat storm situation, slightly different in that resources due to a lot of outages are stretched. And so sometimes the ETOR updates don't happen as frequently as really we want them to. And so that's something we're striving to do, is get better notifications out when there are outages happening such as this. We can do a better job. We will do a better job. And so, but I really want to understand what happened in your instance where you feel like you got no notification at all. So if you feel that way, please send your information in and we'll track it down and try and get you some information. Thanks.
And when you send in your information, please just include a note, notification next to it so we know. But Tom, I just want to jump back on that, because we had several city teammates that were also impacted by the power outages that, in working in our EOC, we're not getting text messages, we're not getting updates. And when we would go and look at the power outage map on the website, it would just say under review and there was no update, and then the power would just come back on. And so in addition to not being notified, even if folks proactively went to the PG&E website, there was zero information for them. And that's really an area that needs to be improved. Is there anything that PG&E can do about that, or can you speak to that?
I'd like Kelly actually would be great to respond to that, about how we post our updates during any kind of outage, but particularly in something like this where we had a lot of outages, a lot of heat events happening simultaneously.
Yeah, I'm happy to, and I'll have to defer, Teresa, to you or others on the technicalities of how what my team does gets out to the greater communities. So I think Tom articulated it pretty well. We will have an auto ETOR estimated time of restoration that goes out based on the historical knowledge of that area, that circuit, that piece of our facility in the neighborhoods that it serves. And that's the immediate response based on how long it's taken us in the past. When we have our troubleshooters get out there and our crew members, we get a much better idea of what's actually going on. And what will happen is they'll call our control centers and touch base with them and say, we see this, or we see this piece of equipment, give us 4 hours, give us 6 hours, give us 8 hours. We need to do some extensive work, or it's an easy fix. And our control centers will update that information in our outage management tool. That now communicates out to our automated notification systems to the constituents that have contact information on file with us. And so that's will go out to as many people as we can possibly get it to. But my team's responsibility is not only to get the power back on safely, quickly, with high quality, but also to inform everybody when it's going to happen. And we have a team trying to make sure that that happens, especially when there's widespread outages, as we saw on the week of September 5th. So I hopefully touched on that, but if I missed anything, Teresa or anyone, please ask me for additional details.
Yeah, I just want to say with regard to the heat event, you know, I totally understand and hear the criticisms. We did not have good information, real-time information that allowed people to make decisions. We had a lot of outages, and I think we just weren't keeping up. I think generally, you know, we track the ETOR accuracy, and we have a very high rate of putting in that estimated time of restoration. And it's one of the priorities. I think we really, that's an area that we need to do a lot better if we have another issue like this. With regard to the other piece of the question about how people get notified, you'll notice here on the slide, you know, online, you can update your contact information. One of the things that we did with regard to this meeting, we sent an email invitation to all our customers who were impacted by outages, those outages. We emailed a letter of invitation to this webinar about a week ago, but we don't have everybody's email address. We also posted on social media, and the city of the city of Morgan Hill also posted and shared with their listservs. So if we do not have your contact information, it's difficult to get that to you in a quick, speedy way. You know, we tried to organize this quickly. The other thing we plan to do is to ask the Morgan Hill Times if we can put an op-ed next week that kind of recaps what we discussed here, as well as directs people to the webinar link so that they can watch it after the fact as well, in case they are not available to join us tonight or they were not aware of the meeting.
Thank you. Can you speak some more to the improvements that'll be made to the equipment moving forward to prevent future failures as a result of our areas changing classification from coastal to inland?
That would be you, James.
All right, thanks for the question. So as part of that change, obviously we have a lot of equipment that's existing in the field that's there to serve the community. And so as new equipment is changed out, all that equipment is sized and rated for that new standard, given the climate environment that we're now seeing in this area. Unfortunately, there's a lot of equipment, a lot of transformers, a lot of cable, a lot of items to address. So over time, we expect to continue to replace that equipment as conditions allow, and we'll continue to forecast and ensure that the capacity of the system is at a level that will be able to reliably serve both the individual customer needs at the residential level, as well as commercial EV charging and the larger loads that are coming onto the system.
Thank you. How's PG&E planning to handle the influx of electric vehicles and housing being built throughout the state, but specifically in our area, given the governor's mandate for electric vehicles by 2035? And how is this going to impact Morgan Hill's rural high-dense population?
Sure, I'll take that one as well. So as part of our annual planning process, we have essentially a year outlook, a 5-year outlook, and a 10-year outlook. And throughout all those planning steps, we're constantly utilizing data, specifically in the case of EV adoption propensity models, EV sales, and other indicators to show where that growth is coming. We're also working very closely with our EV partners such as Tesla, and EVgo and others that are installing fast charging systems within these communities. So we have both a forecasting component of where we're expecting to see these increases in load as a result of electric vehicles, as well as direct dialogue with the developers of the fast charging infrastructure. Within our 10-year integrated grid plan, we have a roadmap for ensuring that the system capacity is maintained given these very bold electrification and electric vehicle goals. As part of that 1 year, 5 year, 10-year planning process, we look at the previous year's peak loading. So for example, the heat wave here early in September, we actually use that to ensure that those forecasts are appropriately reflecting what the actual system loads were during these heat events. And if there's an adjustment that's needed to ensure that the forecasts are aligned, we will make that adjustment. And then the output of all that is to propose new projects, new infrastructure where deficiencies exist to be able to handle those increases going forward.
Can I just add, though, that EVs are really part of the solution actually going forward. You know, the infrastructure that is being built throughout our state is really important. We are modernizing the grid, and there's new pilot programs that are looking at using electric vehicles through bidirectional charging to, in the event of a power outage, to be able to power your home for up to 3 days. We're doing these pilots with a Ford F-150 hybrids right now, and it's extremely promising, and it's a really important aspect of meeting peak loads in times like this, where we saw the highest ever load on the grid in California ever. The Cal ISO hit a new high during the heat storm. So this was not an ordinary loading situation. These were at peak times, late in the afternoon. Obviously, our equipment suffered from heat exhaustion, but the grid itself as well, through this bidirectional charging, we think we'll be able to really make an impact on those peak times when we do have challenges with grid capacity. So I'm happy to share more information with the city about that following the webinar.
Let's see. So there was a question about one of the outages from September 5th. And so one of the rumors that somebody wanted to clear up, that there was an underground fire that was contributing, and they're wanting to know if that was false or fact.
So I would have to look up the specific outage. This is Kelly. In that location, there may have been failed underground equipment that created smoke that may have been seen. That could definitely have happened. I am personally not aware of a fire in the Morgan Hill area that occurred on our equipment or in and or around our vaults, which is thankfully a good thing given the high fire district that some of the areas are in. I'd ask James if he has more engineering information than I do, but I believe what you may have seen is smoke from a failed underground component.
Is that right, James? You concur?
Yeah, I think I have no evidence of that. So
Great.
The 3 outages on 9/5 that Kelly mentioned earlier involved some underground equipment that may have presented itself during the failure, like he said, with smoking conditions. But if there's more questions related to a specific case, then again, please put them in the chat. We'll follow up.
So there's a question here, how many circuits are within Morgan Hill? And besides adding one circuit that was mentioned earlier, what other reliability measures are being proposed? I don't consider repairing equipment as a means to improve reliability to the grid.
All right, so as mentioned earlier, there is more than just this Morgan Hill substation, but I'll focus to that because that really serves the core of the community here. Within that Morgan Hill substation, there is 7 distribution circuits that emanate from that substation, soon to be 8 with that project in 2023. I think there was a good question in the chat that I wanted to address, and that was talking about, again, the east and west side of the 101. So I think as folks are familiar, that this substation is located, again, on the west side of the 101. And the circuits kind of emanate in all directions from that location, with kind of the core of the downtown and kind of centroid of the community being very close in proximity to that substation. However, on the east side of the 101, the same circuits travel and traverse across to east to west and energize the communities on the opposite side. So that was a little bit about the layout there. Another good question that someone asked, and I'm kind of answering a few of these, trying to address some of the other questions in the chat. Someone asked about that protective device that I showed in the Google Earth being quite a bit of ways away from that fire risk boundary. So in that example, I only showed that one device because that was the device I was operating, but we do have many other devices that are closer or within the actual high fire risk areas. In this case, that specific device, so you're answering another question directly here. Someone asked a great question that said, if we had the same event and the same heat event occur next week, how would things be different? So that specific device, we were able to take out of our enhanced power line safety setting scheme because we figured out another way to protect with the same level of wildfire safety some of the overhead circuitry on that east side up into the hills that feed into that high fire risk area with an alternate method. So we noticed that device in particular was operating frequently for various problems on the system. We identified an alternate means of ensuring that enhanced ignition safety mechanism was in place, and we de-scoped that device from future EPSS activation. So now when a problem happens beyond a fuse or another sectionalizing device, the outage will be constrained to a much smaller set of customers. So that's one example of a way we've taken to help kind of slice and dice the system to be able to more positively react when problems occur. And I apologize because I got a little bit sidetracked on trying to answer a few of these other questions. Was there the last part of that question that I still need to address?
You know, James, I admittedly am looking at the next question, so I think if it comes back, we can go through. There are a lot. There's one here that I'd love to bring up. Many of our residents believe that these outages are due to many homes being built in our area and the increased use of electricity by homes, working from home, electric cars, etc. What does PG&E have to say about that? Is increased growth in housing a root cause, or does PG&E have more than enough capacity to meet these needs?
All right, it's a good question. I think we've touched a little bit about this already, but I'm happy to discuss again. So as part of a lot of these increases that are a result of electrification, conversion of natural gas to electric appliances, I think we recently even see in the news that there's discussion about even furnace energy devices that rely on natural gas being converted to heat pumps and other electric sources in the future, that we really have to be proactive on ensuring that as more loads become electrified, that we have the capacity to serve. And I know at my level and Teresa and above that the company understands this is a very important item to begin to tackle. And we have made some great progress in starting to, like I said earlier, use these analytics and forecasting capabilities to try to proactively find where these deficiencies are going to be, not today, not yesterday, but actually 5-10 years out, and start investing in the system in those areas to be able to handle those increases. Electric vehicles present a very large amount of load onto our grid for charging, not only fast charging, but charging within residential settings as well. So we will have to continue to monitor that, to forecast it, to plan grid upgrades to accommodate that, as well as work with renewable solutions, energy storage, so that we can incorporate not only these solutions to handle localized issues, but to help benefit the overall California energy grid, so that not only will we prevent these localized issues from occurring in the future, but also address some of the larger grid energy issues that we've seen. We fortunately didn't have to pull that trigger for rotating outages this past event, but these types of energy storage and DER solutions being integrated will help solve both the challenges going forward.
Thank you, James. So there are several questions. We have about 14 minutes left, but I'm seeing several questions about circuits. What is a circuit? Why did one circuit in particular fail so many times? Would it be better to divide the large circuits? So PG&E team, if somebody can speak to those and specifically how the circuits in Morgan Hill were impacted.
James, do you want to take that? I'm happy to answer kind of what a circuit is, and we can touch on. I think if we go back to slide 7, the 2109, or let's call it the east side of 101 had so many issues, and maybe I could get your help on that one. But basically, a circuit is what is served out of our substation and the path that the line follows. And so that line can be both overhead and underground, depending on the years that it was installed and the requirements within the developments in which it was put in. And so really coming from the substation out and sort of spidering out into the communities, you're going to see that as a circuit. So it's a self-contained piece of electrical system that serves our customers. I don't know if I'm doing it justice, but I think that the graphic that James showed earlier really showed a good sort of helicopter view of what a circuit is, where it serves our customers. And I believe the second part of that question was, why did the 2109 fail several times? And I asked for this slide to be brought back up again because I did want to show this one again. And so if we look at the circuit column here, there are a number of issues that happened, and they happen to be on the Morgan Hill 2109 circuit. So there was a heat event, there was an overloading due to heat, just overloaded equipment that relayed open. The next one down, we had failed underground equipment. You have protective devices protecting the system. It was just, the 2109 is a larger circuit. And I do see questions about segmenting, and I think James addressed those with our incoming project for 2023 coming in. But there were a litany of different issues that happened on the 2109 that we experienced during that period. And so it wasn't like it was one issue. Unfortunately, it was a litany of different things. And I may not be doing it justice, but James, if you have more of an engineering insight, I would appreciate your input here.
No, it's great. Great question, and thanks, Kelly. Kind of going back to the overview earlier, that 2109 circuit does feed quite a distance, right, from all the way on the west side near downtown, all the way up to the east foothills, and a lot of that's a result of where, historically we've been able to site substations where transmission lines are located and those kind of constraints. In terms of the repeated outages here, I'm glad you pulled up this slide, because the 2109 here, yes, has frankly been impacted substantially in the past few weeks. The first outage there on the top, that was the 3:54 p.m. on 9/5, again, was related to the sensitivity of our settings on that line recloser, that protective device that I had showed kind of in the middle of the screen. And it's needing to be able to be set sensitive enough to protect against the fire risk, while also having enough margin to be able to accommodate what we projected was the peak load to be expected on that device. So during the heat event, the peak load grew beyond what we had expected due to the duration and the amount of load, and ended up operating the device. That was the first outage there at 3:54 p.m. on 9/5. Subsequent outage that same evening, again, due to, we resolved that issue. We got that device back in service. And then after the circuit was re-energized, unfortunately, we had another outage as a result of the equipment failure. If you could just pull back up that slide with the outages on there. That was the event there at 10:01 p.m. Then kind of skipping through down to 9/8, we actually had a sort of unique event here where at 9/8 at 1:15 at 1:15 p.m. on what's indicated here as a 2111 circuit, we had an overhead conductor arcing fault on actually an adjacent circuit. But that disturbance on the system, and I apologize if we're getting a little bit technical here, but I appreciate bearing with me here. That disturbance on that 2111 circuit actually induced problems on the 2109 and the 2110 circuit, as shown with the 3:58 p.m. outage time on three separate or on three different line items here. The reason that happened was, again, because of these safety settings being set so sensitively that a disturbance actually on a completely separate circuit ended up creating an outage on an unrelated branch of the system. EPSS is a relatively new program to PG&E, again, since late August 2021. We've expanded it tremendously. My team is in charge and responsible for the engineering that goes into these settings. And I can assure you that we are optimizing our fire risk prevention while still enabling the most reliable service that can be provided. And so as we see these events, as we learn, as we understand how the system reacts, we're taking measures to mitigate these impacts. These settings, this method of protection on the system has never been introduced at the scale anywhere in the country that PG&E has embarked on. And I'm not just saying that to defer to that effort, but to hopefully allow us to understand that not only are we really trying to balance this wildfire safety protection, but that we're trying to optimize it in a way that allows us to continue to serve reliably while still providing the enhanced protection There is a bit of a trade-off there. I'm not going to dismiss that. And where we find that balance and where we find that trade-off is very critical. And as we experience these events, we will bring back that data, interpret it, make adjustments, and ultimately look to improve the experience of these outages when they do occur.
Thank you,
So I hope
James.
that provided a little perspective there.
We have many, many more questions, and I do apologize. We won't be able to get to all of them, but I will put up the PG&E email address shortly for those folks who may want to follow up. I do have one last question I wanted to ask. I live in a 55 and older community, and many of my older neighbors rely on power for health reasons, and as well as being older and not being able to deal with such heat in their homes. They simply don't understand what's happening, and it's very stressful and concerning. Can we have representatives come speak to our community and others on how best to prepare and manage for future outages?
I will take this one. Absolutely. Happy to do so. Happy to have a team come out and answer your questions for sure. If you want to just send, and if we can move to the slide that has all the different websites and email addresses. If you want to send an email to us at wildfiresafety@pge.com, it's a dedicated email address for these webinars. We will be sure to come out and talk to your group. No problem. A couple of other things that I saw in the chat that I wanted to comment on as we're closing. The regional vice presidents are now hosting an open town hall once a quarter. So the first one that I had was at the end of August. We emailed all of the customers in my region, which is 6 counties. Every customer that we had an email address for, we invited them to an open webinar, town hall. And it was open to any and all questions. I had a big team of about 10 subject matter experts that could respond to customer service questions, to claims, to bills, to anything that came up. So the next one is likely going to be in January, but we need your email address in order to send you an invitation. So again, if you want to go to pge.com/myalerts and just your main account information, if you can add your email, then we are happy to include you in that. Secondly, Amy posted a question regarding asking us to follow up and let the city and residents know when these upgrades happen. And I will say that's something that we don't do well enough, and we need to do better, is to really reflect back to the community when we're doing work and how it is going to improve or impact their service. So I am committing to, and I guarantee you that the city is going to stay on us to continue to communicate what we are doing to improve the system. And we absolutely need to do that and get that information out to customers as well. So with that, I just want to thank everyone for your participation, for your questions. I hope this was informative. Again, we'll follow up with the link to this webinar. We will share it with the newspaper. We'll share it obviously with the city, who can send it out as well. But this is not the end of our coordination with you or the city. We're happy to be here tonight to talk a little bit about these issues, and we just are very, very happy to be part of the community ourselves and continue to improve our service and communication with you. So with that, I'll hand it over to the city.
Thank you, Teresa. I want to just thank everyone for joining us tonight to hear from PG&E on where things are, where we were and where they're headed. I want to really encourage you to continue to reach out. We, as mentioned, will be able to take the Q&A and get responses to the questions that just unfortunately weren't addressed tonight. And as I mentioned in my comments, we will be seeing PG&E at a future council meeting. And so that'll be another opportunity to engage. And so with that, we say good night and see many of you tomorrow at our council meeting. Thank you.